Hello, welcome back. I'm Andreas, your tech-curious web designer. In the last video, we set up a basic Django application and we are ready now to add the Stripe integration. We will see how we can easily add a payment process for a product and create a record of it in our database. But before we get started, a quick shout out to my newest supporter on Patreon. A high five to FunMin. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. And if you like this content, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, buy me a coffee or support me on Patreon. All this helps me keep this channel going and to create more content for you guys. Okay, and now without further ado, let's dive in. This is the product page we have built in the last video. Now let's add the Stripe integration. For this, let's first create a Stripe account. So let's go to stripe.com. If you're interested in the Stripe documentation, you can find it here under Developers and click on a guide. The Stripe integration is very well documented, so you should find here any requirements you need. But first, let's create an account and sign in. This is the Stripe dashboard. And to test integration with our website, we can use a test mode. So here on top, we just switch to test mode. And in this mode, we can use a fake credit card Stripe provides to test the payments. To connect to the Stripe API, we need a secret key, and you can grab this key straight from here, or we can also go to the developer section. Here we click on the API keys tab. And on this page, we see a publishable key. This key we would use on the front end with JavaScript, but we only connect to this API from the backend. So we're only interested in the secret key. So for this, I click here, reveal test key, click to copy it. And now I add this key as an environment variable to my project. Then in my core folder, I create an env file. Add this Stripe secret key test variable and paste the key in here. Okay, save this file. Next, I install the environ package to read from this env file. Pip install Django-environ. Then I'm going to my settings.py file. And here at the very top, I add the environ configuration. Okay. And then at the very bottom of this file, I add the Stripe secret key, which is linked to the test key. On the live side, this obviously needs to be switched over to a real secret key. Okay, save this file. Now let's get back to Stripe again and add a product. For this, we're going to the product catalog here and create a product. So here we add now all the product information, the name, description, upload an image. Recurring we would select for subscription, but we choose here the one-off option for a one-time payment, then the amount, US dollars as the currency, and click Add Product. So our product is now on Stripe. Let's click on it. So on this page, we can see, for example, the product ID, but actually what we are interested in is the price ID. On Stripe, a product can have multiple price objects attached to it, because we can offer different pricing options for the same product, such as different tiers or discounts or different prices in different currencies. And to get the price ID, we could click on the three dots here and copy the price ID, but we can also click on the price here. This is the page of this specific price object, and up here we can copy the price ID. And we include this price ID as a hidden input field on the product page. So the product page is in the Stripe folder here, to templates and product.html. This is the form with the buy button, and I included here two hidden input fields. The first one for the price ID. We add here now the ID to the value attribute. and the second one for the quantity. I will keep the quantity at 1, but this could also be changed to a dynamic value. So this price ID is all what Stripe needs to identify the price and the product, and we can create a checkout session. But before we do that, let's make this page more dynamic. So for now, this page is still a static page with a hard-coded product name, price and description. Let's see how we can display the product information on this page using the product ID from the Stripe API. To connect to the Stripe API, we need to install the Stripe package with pip install Stripe. Then we go to our product view. So in the Stripe folder, we go to views.py. First we import Stripe. And then we add the Stripe API key, which is the Stripe secret key we defined in the settings file. Let's import settings. And with this, our application can communicate with Stripe. Next, I add here the product ID. Let's get this value from Stripe. So back to the product. And I copy now the product ID and add it in here. And with this product ID, we can retrieve the product object. And then I pass this object to the front end. Okay, save this file. Let's go back to the template. And add here the product name variable. Now the price variable does actually not work like this, because as I mentioned before, the price is not directly stored on a product object, because a product can have many prices. We will see how we can add this in a second. But we can also add the product description here. Like this. Okay, now let's start up the server again and check it out. I refresh the page. And as we can see, we have now the name and description loaded from the Stripe API. Let's fix now the price. So each product has a list of prices. So with this line, we get all the prices connected to a product. And then I just grab the first price in this list with index 0. Because in my case, there's only one price for this product. And the value I get from the unit amount of this price object will be in cent. So to get the dollar amount, I divide this value by 100. And the .0 displays the number with a decimal point. And then I pass this variable to the front end. Let's save this file. And add it now to the product page. So product underscore price. Save this file. And let's check it out. I refresh the page. And now we have the price here. Nice.
Nice.
Okay, and now let's implement the buy button. So back to the views.py. So if it's a post request, I want to check first if the user is actually logged into the page. If not, I redirect him to the login page. Let's import redirect. So this would just redirect the user to the login page. A better solution is to redirect the user back to the product page when he has signed in. And we can do this with this f string. So we construct here the whole URL with the next parameter. So first we're using here the base URL. This is the domain of the website. Let's add this to our settings.py file. This is my domain in development, and obviously it would need to be adjusted for the live site. The reverse function is giving me the path for the account login URL. Let's also import reverse. And the next parameter is holding the full path of the product page the user is redirected to after signing in. Okay, with this we made sure the user is logged in. Then we can create our checkout session now. For this we retrieve first the price ID from the front end, as well as the quantity. Okay, and now we create the Stripe checkout session. So as first attribute in this checkout session, we have line items. These are basically individual products being purchased. If you have a shopping cart, you would populate this dynamically. I only have one product, so I add it in here manually, with the price ID and the quantity. Then we define the payment method types. I add here card. The mode I set to payment for a one-time payment. For a recurring payment, we would use subscription. Then I set the customer creation to always. This basically creates a new customer for each checkout session, and this is recommended for one-time payments when you don't need to store payment details for future use. Next, we have the success URL. This is the URL the customer will be redirected to after the payment was successfully completed. Here again, I construct this URL with an f-string, with domain, the path, which we still have to create, and I also add here the session ID, so that the success page has access to the data. And we also add the cancel URL. This is the URL the customers are redirected to when the customer cancelled the payment process. Alright, with this we created now a checkout session object and redirect the user now to the checkout session page hosted on Stripe. Code 303 means see other and is used for redirections and prevents the unintended duplication of a checkout session. Next, we create the landing pages for the success and the cancel URLs. With this function, I return a static success landing page. Let's create this page now. So I copy the name, go to my a_stripe folder, and create this page. And again, the code for this page you can grab from my GitHub repository at github.com/ndchat/stripe. Here we select payment_successful.html. I copy the code and save this file. And now the same for the cancel page. Here is the function. Again, I copy the name, create a page, and copy and paste the code from the repository. Alright, we can save this file. And now let's add the URLs. So I'm going to my urls.py file, add the payment successful path, and the payment cancel path. Save this file. Okay, and now let's do a test of the checkout session. I refresh the page, click the buy button, and because I was not logged in, it redirected me to the sign-in page, so let's sign in first. Let's click the buy button. And I was redirected now to the Stripe checkout page. Here I fill out the form, but as this is in the test mode, any email we do, and as a credit card we use 4 times 4242. The expiry date can be any future date, and 3 random numbers for the verification code. Then we add any name as the cardholder name, and then we click Pay. And as we can see, we got redirected to our success page. Awesome!
Yes! That's awesome!
Let's check on Stripe now if the payment was really successful. So here we go to transactions. And as we can see, indeed we have here a record of this payment. And we can also check out the customer it created. So we go here to customers. And here we have the customer. Okay, this page has access to the session ID as we have included it in the URL. Let's utilize it by retrieving the name of the customer and displaying it on this page. So here in the payment successful function, I will grab now the session ID. Then if we have an ID, I can retrieve the session object. Then the customer ID we can get with session.customer. Then the customer object I can retrieve from the customer table on Stripe. And then I pass the customer object to the front end. And we can display the name with customer.name. Okay, let's go one step further now and also create a record of this payment in our database. With this line, I grab the line item, which represents the object in the Stripe checkout session. And then I create a user payment object in the database. I use the getOcreate function here to avoid creating duplicated records. Let's import the user payment model class. So from .models import everything. So our user is the logged in user. The Stripe custom ID is our custom ID from before. The Stripe checkout ID we got straight from the URL. The Stripe product ID we get from the line item object .price.product. The product name is the line item description. Then we add the quantity, the price, the currency, and finally has paid is true. Alright, let's save this file and let's do a test. I click here back to home, again to shop, and click on the buy button. Now let's add some information. This time I'm paying as Bobby. And pay. And as we can see, the customer's name is now displayed on this page. Now let's also check the database. So I go to /admin, go here to user payments. And indeed, we have a record here now with all the data from the session.
Yes!
Alright, we are creating this record here when the user is landing on the success page. However, it's possible that, for example, if the user disconnects from the internet after making a payment, the payment object might not be created in the database. A safer and more reliable option is to use a webhook to create this object. The webhook is triggered by an event, such as the successful completion of a payment, and then directly communicates with a web server where the application runs. Let's see how this works in theory, because a webhook requires a live domain as an endpoint. So here I define the Stripe webhook function. Then I add here the require post decorator, which ensures that this function can only be accessed by a post request. And also the CSRF exempt decorator, which disables the CSRF protection from this function, which we normally need for every post request. But in this case, the request comes straight from Stripe, so an external service, which does not have the CSRF token. Okay, let's import those two decorators. And then we define the event. With the construct event method, we retrieve the data from the Stripe event and also validate if the data really comes from Stripe. So the payload contains the data in JSON format. The signature header is used to verify that the request is really from Stripe. And the endpoint secret is a unique key we can get from Stripe. Okay, let's define now those three parameters. For the endpoint, I create an environment variable and store it in the env file. I define it in the settings.py file. Go to my env file and add it in here. So here in the developer section, we click on the Webhooks tab. And here we can add an endpoint. But as mentioned before, this webhook only works with a public domain as an endpoint. But you could install the Stripe CLI to test it locally or use a service called ngrok. However, I will not cover them in this video, but they're fairly easy to set up. So we would add here our URL from our live domain. I have here, for example, the path /payment/Stripe webhook. And then we also add an event trigger. And the event we're looking for is under checkout. Checkout session completed. Okay, and then add events and add endpoint. With this, we created now a webhook for the checkout session. And the key we are looking for to connect to our application is the signing secret here. We click here to reveal the key, copy the string, and add it to the environment variable. Alright, save this file. And now back to the function. So the endpoint is now defined. The payload is the body of the request, and the data here come in a JSON format. And the signature header we get from request.meta. Optionally, we can initialize the event here by setting it to none, and then add here a try and accept block. And if the construct event fails for some reason, we return a HTTP response with status of 400, which represents a bad request error. Let's import HTTP response. Alright. So once we have the event, we can check if the event type is the correct one. And in this case, we are checking for a checkout session completed event. With this line, we get the session object from the JSON data. And with getID, the session ID. So with this information, we could create the user payment object now through the webhook. Or if an object already exists in the database, we can update it. So here I'm accessing an object with the session ID we already have in the database. And then I can, for example, update the hasPaid property. And we return a HTTP response with status 200 for OK. Now let's also add the URL. And with that, we set up a webhook that should work on a live site. Let's do another test and see if the webhook triggers on Stripe. This time the customer is Pete. And pay. The payment was successful. Let's check the webhook. I refresh the page. And as we can see, the webhook was triggered after the session was successfully completed. However, it failed to connect to the remote host, because obviously we just used a fake domain. But here underneath we can see the data the webhook tried to send to the server in JSON format. Alright, this is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. And if you like this content, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel, so you will be notified about the next video when we're building a shopping cart. Until then, stay curious my friends, and bye bye for now.